An engine failure occurred on Flight 447 while cruising at 38,000 feet, putting all passengers in mortal danger. Their salvation came from an unassuming passenger in Seat 14C, who turned out to be the renowned combat aviator known as Viper 7. Her remarkable rescue operation was so impressive that classified stealth F-22 aircraft violated their required communication blackout specifically to pay tribute to the former military ace who rescued everyone on board. Please share your location in the comments before viewing the complete narrative, and remember to follow our channel. The narrative begins at Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport in Atlanta during a hectic morning period. Travelers move through the terminal with their bags as taxis deliver arrivals, with morning sunlight bouncing off the glass terminal buildings while people rush to reach their departure gates. Boarding commences for Flight 447 bound for Los Angeles at Gate B12. Standing in the crowd is 42-year-old Sarah Chin, dressed casually in denim pants and a pullover, holding a compact duffel. Her actions are efficient and deliberate, with only her watchful eyes revealing any hint of military background as they continuously survey her environment. The boarding announcement comes through the speakers as the gate agent calls for final passengers on Flight 447 headed to Los Angeles. Sarah presents her ticket with a brief acknowledgement, avoiding any small talk. Sarah takes her assigned position in Seat 14C, within the Boeing 737-800's middle cabin section, and retrieves a fiction book. Despite appearing absorbed in reading, her side vision monitors each boarding passenger and staff member's actions. Marcus Williams, a 35-year-old anxious business traveler, occupies the adjacent seat while struggling with his computer case. Marcus mentions with anxiety that flying still unsettles him, despite months since his last trip, particularly given recent aviation incidents in the news. Sarah offers a concise, courteous reply that air travel remains the most secure transportation method before returning her attention to her book. Marcus remains unaware he's seated beside someone with more than 3,000 flight hours piloting F-16 Fighting Falcon aircraft, and who previously led the prestigious 64th Aggressor Squadron at Nellis Air Force Base. The cabin crew performs their safety presentation while 58-year-old Captain James Bradley and 34-year-old First Officer Lisa Martinez work through their pre-departure procedures in the flight deck. Captain Bradley brings 22 years of airline flying expertise, whereas Martinez recently advanced from regional carrier operations. Their conversation covers meteorological conditions and the planned route. While passengers prepare for the 5-hour trip to Los Angeles, Sarah maintains awareness of her surroundings without appearing observant. She mentally counts passengers, identifies emergency exit positions, and assesses the crew's proficiency based on their behavior and interaction styles. Her experienced observation detects the subtle shake in the first officer's hands during the safety demonstration, notices how the senior cabin attendant puts weight on her left leg, preferentially, and identifies the air marshal, positioned 3 rows back in Seat 14A. During pushback from the gate, Sarah permits herself a modest smile. This journey represented her first genuine holiday in 8 years following her departure from active military service. The previous decade involved flying highly dangerous operations in enemy airspace, evaluating experimental planes that challenged physical limits, and instructing future generations of combat aviators. Now she was traveling to attend her sister's California wedding ceremony, riding as an ordinary passenger on a standard commercial flight. The Boeing 737 moves toward runway 26L after Atlanta Approach Control provides takeoff authorization. Captain Bradley advances the throttles and the plane starts its departure sequence. Sarah experiences the known feeling of forward motion and becoming airborne, though this passenger aircraft feels less responsive compared to the supersonic fighters she typically commanded. The seatbelt indicator extinguishes at 10,000 feet altitude, allowing passengers to move throughout the cabin. 37 minutes after departure, while maintaining cruise altitude at 38,000 feet above Alabama, the initial warning sign emerges. Sarah detects it ahead of others, an unusual variation in engine vibration that shouldn't exist. She sets aside her book and focuses intently on the aircraft's acoustic signatures. Her combat aviation experience identifies an issue with the number 2 engine. Though the difference is so minor, most people would miss it. Within the flight deck, Captain Bradley and First Officer Martinez discuss routing modifications when an amber alert illuminates on their control panel. The second engine shows elevated temperature, though measurements remain within tolerable ranges. Captain Bradley chooses to observe the condition instead of immediately redirecting, a choice that will become nearly disastrous within moments. Sarah's focus intensifies as she perceives a minor yaw movement indicating unequal power output. She releases her restraint and rises, appearing to access the overhead storage while actually gaining better perception of the aircraft's characteristics. The minor vibration changes and barely noticeable engine sound variations indicate imminent engine loss. At 11:23 in the morning, 41 minutes into the journey, the second engine suffers complete breakdown. The blast is thunderous as turbine components tear through the engine housing, cutting hydraulic conduits and causing severe wing structural damage. The plane immediately veers sharply rightward as Captain Bradley struggles to sustain control. Warning indicators activate across the cabin as breathing masks descend and passengers start shouting in panic. Captain Bradley announces an emergency and tries following established protocols for engine malfunction. However, this situation exceeds standard emergency parameters. Hydraulic liquid sprays from the compromised wing, numerous alert indicators illuminate the cockpit instrument panel, and the aircraft grows progressively harder to manage. First Officer Martinez starts reviewing the emergency reference list, but her tone reveals increasing alarm as successive systems display critical malfunctions. Sarah acts without delay, advancing forward against the tilting cabin floor. Her military conditioning activates as heightened alertness sharpens her concentration. She arrives at the cockpit entrance and presents her credentials to the flight attendants, though she withholds her complete military credentials initially. Lead flight attendant Jennifer Collins attempts maintaining composure while managing distressed passengers and the aircraft's aggressive motion. Through the slightly opened cockpit entrance, Sarah observes Captain Bradley wrestling with flight controls, while First Officer Martinez urgently works through emergency protocols. The destruction far exceeds a simple engine malfunction. Debris from the disintegrated engine has severed essential flight control wiring, compromised wing integrity, and generated an aerodynamic crisis, pushing the aircraft toward an unrecoverable state. Captain Bradley possesses solid experience, but his instruction emphasized routine emergencies and conventional procedures. This cascading systems breakdown surpasses anything addressed in commercial aviation preparation. The plane continues losing height despite full power from the functioning engine, and the damaged wing generates such excessive resistance and instability that standard flight controls grow increasingly useless. Sarah reaches an instantaneous conclusion that will preserve every life aboard. She enters the cockpit forcefully and declares her identity as Captain Chin, retired United States Air Force, assuming authority over this aircraft. Captain Bradley begins objecting, but Sarah's expression immediately communicates her complete competence. Her composed assurance amid disorder exceeds anything he's previously encountered. Sarah rapidly evaluates the destruction and understands they're confronting multiple critical breakdowns requiring combat-grade flying abilities to survive. Standard emergency protocols won't succeed because this isn't a conventional emergency. She must operate this disabled aircraft like an injured fighter jet returning from combat engagement. Employing methods absent from civilian aviation guides, she assumes the controls and instantly senses the aircraft's state through tactile and proprioceptive feedback. The control pressure feels completely wrong. The rudder pedals demand continuous force to maintain direction, and the throttle reaction is delayed and erratic. However, Sarah has previously flown damaged aircraft, including an F-16 with half its wing destroyed by a ground-launched missile over enemy land. She understands how to keep wounded aircraft flying. Initially, Sarah decreases power and drops the nose to avoid aerodynamic stall, something contrary to Captain Bradley's instincts but essential, given the damaged wing's modified aerodynamic properties. She initiates a gradual descent, maintaining velocity while preserving limited control capability. Her hands manipulate the controls with exactness developed through thousands of hours operating superior performance aircraft in survival situations. Sarah coordinates with air traffic control, demanding immediate guidance to the closest appropriate airport while clarifying their situation's gravity. She presents the reality plainly. They have numerous system breakdowns, structural compromise, and restricted control capability. This aircraft requires immediate landing, and executing that safely will demand every skill in her possession. Meanwhile, 50 miles distant and 15,000 feet above the damaged airliner, two F-22 Raptor stealth fighters conduct a classified training operation. Major David Razor Torres and Captain Michelle Phoenix Jackson fly in communication blackout, rehearsing long-range interceptions against simulated adversaries. Their advanced radar equipment detects the emergency transponder broadcast from Flight 447, but rigorous operational secrecy rules forbid acknowledging or investigating civilian planes. The F-22 aviators monitor emergency channels while continuing their classified operation profile. They receive partial communications between the troubled airliner and air traffic control, including mentions of extensive structural destruction and an unknown pilot who has taken command. The professional capability demonstrated in the mysterious pilot's radio transmissions captures their interest, but they remain constrained by silence protocols. Aboard Flight 447, Sarah pushes the damaged Boeing 737 to its complete boundaries while remaining within the restricted flight parameters, preventing total control loss. She applies methods acquired from operating experimental planes at Edwards Air Force Base, where she evaluated prototype fighters regularly functioning at the threshold of complete failure. The tolerance for mistakes essentially equals zero, and one incorrect action will condemn everyone present. Captain Bradley observes with astonishment as Sarah extracts capability from the disabled aircraft that should be unattainable given the damage extent. She employs asymmetric power, selective spoilers, and rudder movements in sequences he's never witnessed, generating artificial steadiness in an inherently unstable condition. Her piloting so greatly exceeds normal civilian abilities that it appears almost otherworldly. Sarah makes a cabin announcement describing the circumstances truthfully but serenely. She informs passengers they've sustained considerable damage, but that she possesses the necessary abilities for safe landing. Her voice projects complete confidence and command, characteristics that help settle the frightened passengers despite their continuing danger. She designates particular flight attendants to watch different cabin sections for further issues while she concentrates on flying. The Birmingham Shuttlesworth International Airport approach demands Sarah perform a modified emergency descent that would be unachievable for most aviators. The compromised wing produces unpredictable lift patterns, varying with velocity and attack angle, while the unbalanced power from the single functioning engine necessitates constant rudder adjustments, threatening to overwhelm the weakened flight controls. Sarah computes approach velocities mentally, accounting for the aircraft's changed stall properties and diminished maneuverability. She'll require maintaining greater than standard approach velocity to avoid control loss, but that entails landing with extended rollout on a runway potentially lacking sufficient stopping length. The calculations of energy control among her specializations from test pilot training become vital for survival. As Flight 447 starts its final descent, the F-22 pilots slightly violate protocol by switching to emergency channels for closer situation monitoring. What they hear amazes them. The pilot managing this seemingly impossible rescue displays aeronautical expertise and tactical judgment far surpassing civilian aviation instruction. Her radio communications employ language and ideas from military test pilot curricula, indicating advanced preparation that few globally possess. Major Torres identifies particular expressions and methods exclusively taught at the Air Force Test Pilot Academy at Edwards Air Force Base. The unknown pilot's application of energy control fundamentals, her mentions of asymmetric thrust manipulation, and her conversation about modified approach methods suggests someone with comprehensive military flight evaluation background. Captain Jackson observes the pilot's identification format doesn't align with conventional civilian aviation, but matches military convention she recognizes from elite fighter units. Sarah establishes final approach alignment while coordinating with ground emergency response crews. She instructs passengers on crash landing protocols, though she intends avoiding a crash if achievable. Her strategy involves performing a controlled touchdown, utilizing every method she knows from operating damaged aircraft, but the success probability is extremely narrow, given the Boeing 737's compromised flight behavior. The approach requires Sarah maintaining exact control movements while the aircraft attempts rolling right from the damaged wing and yawing left from unequal thrust. She's essentially flying formation with her own aircraft, applying minute control adjustments to sustain proper glide path, while the plane resists her every input. This flying type demands stick and rudder proficiency only achievable through years operating high-capability military planes. At 200 feet above the landing surface, Sarah encounters significant wind shear, normally requiring abandoning the approach. However, this aircraft possesses only one landing opportunity. She adjusts with power modifications and control movements, pushing both her abilities and the aircraft's capabilities to absolute boundaries. The compromised wing generates erratic lift changes, requiring instantaneous corrections, preventing control loss. The landing contact is firmer than optimal, but within landing gear tolerance. Sarah immediately activates spoilers and applies full braking while utilizing reverse power from the functioning engine and aerodynamic deceleration methods to reduce speed. The damaged wing produces asymmetric resistance, threatening to pull them from the runway, but Sarah responds with differential braking and rudder movements, keeping them centered on the pavement. As Flight 447 stops moving, emergency vehicles encircle the aircraft while passengers exit through emergency chutes. Every individual aboard survives without major harm, an impossible result given the damage extent and system malfunctions they encountered. Sarah stays at the controls until the final passenger evacuates, upholding the military custom of accepting responsibility for everyone under her authority. Ground crew examining the aircraft subsequently characterized the destruction as catastrophic. The engine blast severed multiple control wiring, damaged wing framework, and created aerodynamic states normally producing control loss and ground collision. The successful landing of this aircraft with complete survival represents flying proficiency existing at military aviation's highest echelons. Meanwhile, the F-22 pilots have monitored emergency channels throughout the rescue mission. As information surfaces regarding the pilot who rescued Flight 447, their onboard systems begin matching voice characteristics, identification formats, and operational methods with military records. The findings appearing on their classified monitors caused both pilots to violate strict communication blackout protocols simultaneously. Major Torres and Captain Jackson identify the call sign Viper 7 from their advanced tactical instruction at the United States Air Force Weapons School. This isn't simply any military aviator. This is Sarah Viper Chin, the legendary commander of the 64th Aggressor Squadron, who transformed air combat instruction and flew classified operations pushing the limits of military aviation possibility. Her methods are examined in elite fighter units worldwide. The F-22 pilots reach an extraordinary determination to abandon their classified operation and violate mandatory communication silence, honoring the pilot who just accomplished one of aviation history's most extraordinary rescue missions. Major Torres broadcasts on emergency frequency that Razor 1 and Phoenix 2 are breaking radio silence to recognize a legend, calling the rescue a textbook save, and noting her methods remain taught at weapons school. Captain Jackson adds that Phoenix 2 agrees, stating the approach and landing will be analyzed for decades, and expressing honor-sharing airspace with her. Their broadcasts violate every operational secrecy rule they've pledged to maintain, but both pilots consider the violation worthwhile to acknowledge exceptional flying from one of military aviation's most esteemed personalities. Air traffic controllers are amazed hearing F-22 Raptor pilots break communication silence addressing a civilian plane, something never occurring during classified missions. Military command facilities monitoring the channels are similarly surprised that stealth fighter pilots would jeopardize operational secrecy, honoring a retired pilot, demonstrating the exceptional regard Sarah Chin commands within the military aviation field. Sarah, now positioned beside the damaged airliner as investigators record the wreckage, receives the F-22 transmissions through her headset. For the first instant since the emergency commenced, she smiles. She activates her microphone and replies that Viper 7 acknowledges Razor 1 and Phoenix 2 appreciates the recognition, but standard methods apply to any aircraft when lives are threatened, advising them to stay alert. The brief radio conversation between the F-22 pilots and Sarah becomes famous within military aviation communities. Stealth fighter pilots functioning under the most stringent security rules don't break communication silence for anyone, but they created an exception for a pilot whose abilities and command have shaped an entire aviator generation. Their readiness to accept disciplinary consequences honoring her accomplishment reflects the deep respect she's gained through decades of outstanding service. News outlets covering the emergency touchdown initially emphasized the dramatic rescue and miraculous passenger and crew survival. However, as information emerges regarding the pilot who rescued everyone aboard, the narrative grows significantly larger. Sarah Chin's military history reveals itself progressively, displaying a career of remarkable achievements reading like fiction, but documented in classified military archives. Sarah commanded the elite 64th Aggressor Squadron at Nellis Air Force Base, where she instructed the most proficient fighter pilots globally. She logged over 3,000 hours in F-16 Fighting Falcons and F-15 Eagles, including combat operations in hostile airspace remaining classified. As a test aviator at Edwards Air Force Base, she operated experimental planes, pushing aerodynamic and human performance boundaries under extreme circumstances. Her air combat tactical innovations revolutionized fighter pilot instruction and continue being taught at advanced military institutions. She created methods for operating damaged aircraft, saving numerous lives throughout her military service, abilities proving critical when civilian emergency protocols proved insufficient handling Flight 447's multiple system breakdowns. The Flight 447 engine malfunction investigation discloses that conventional emergency protocols would have produced control loss and ground collision with 0 survivors. The structural damage, system malfunctions, and aerodynamic disruption combination generated a situation exceeding civilian aviation instruction scope. Only someone with Sarah's distinctive background operating severely damaged high-capability aircraft possessed the necessary abilities achieving successful results. Captain Bradley attributes Sarah with rescuing his life and all others aboard. He characterizes her flying as unlike anything he's previously observed, displaying methods and capabilities appearing impossible given the aircraft's state. First Officer Martinez describes the landing as the most impressive airmanship demonstration she's witnessed, performed under conditions challenging even highly experienced military pilots. The Federal Aviation Administration performs a comprehensive investigation, concluding Sarah's action prevented certain deaths through applying advanced flying methods not included in standard civilian instruction. Her capability maintaining control of a catastrophically damaged aircraft while performing a successful emergency touchdown represents the supreme levels of pilot proficiency and aeronautical understanding. Military aviation scholars position Flight 447's successful emergency landing among the modern era's most notable pilot accomplishments. The technical knowledge, tactical judgment, and exceptional flying abilities combination required saving everyone aboard demonstrates why Sarah Chin is regarded as among the finest pilots ever serving in the United States Air Force. The F-22 pilots who violated communication silence honoring Sarah encountered disciplinary examination for breaking operational secrecy protocols during a classified operation. However, Senior Military Command recognizes their decision's unprecedented character and the respect it shows for one of military aviation's most distinguished figures. The occurrence becomes a leadership judgment case study and the connections uniting military aviators across different planes and operations. Sarah returns to her peaceful retirement, rejecting most interview solicitations and media focus. She views herself as an aviator who performed what any trained pilot would do under similar conditions. However, those understanding military aviation comprehend that her abilities exist at a level reached by extremely few people worldwide, and her heroic Flight 447 actions represent the culmination of a lifetime devoted to aviation excellence and serving others. The Flight 447 narrative becomes famous in both civilian and military aviation circles. It shows how exceptional preparation, background, and commitment can overcome apparently impossible situations when lives are endangered. Sarah Chin's capability rescuing everyone aboard a catastrophically damaged plane while maintaining the serene professionalism of a genuine aviation commander exemplifies military service and pilot excellence's highest standards. Years afterward, the methods Sarah employed saving Flight 447 are integrated into advanced emergency instruction curricula for both military and civilian pilots. Her innovative damaged aircraft flying approaches contribute to enhanced survival percentages in extreme emergency circumstances, ensuring her knowledge continues preserving lives well beyond her active duty retirement. The connection between military aviators shown when F-22 pilots violated communication silence honoring Sarah's achievement emphasizes the significant respect that exceptional flying commands within the aviation field. Their readiness accepting consequences for recognizing genuine excellence reflects the principles and customs defining military aviation at its peak. Sarah Chin's narrative reminds us that heroes frequently move among us unidentified, possessing abilities and background obtained through decades of committed service. When circumstances required everything she'd learned operating the world's most sophisticated aircraft under the most hazardous conditions, she responded with the understated professionalism characterizing the finest military aviators. The Flight 447 passengers and crew owe their existence to training curricula, background gained through innumerable hours in demanding situations, and the instantaneous judgment stemming from years operating high-capability aircraft where errors are calculated in lives lost or preserved. Sarah's heroic conduct proves that abilities acquired in military service continue benefiting the greater community long after the uniform is removed.